Hey, I'm Jefferson Graham with USA Today. We are going to have a fun panel today, talking to three VCs here to talk about what they're looking for and what they're not looking for, to talk about some consumer tech trends, and let's bring them out. Hey guys, come join us. We've got Erik Rannala, Erik Manlunas, and Alex Taussig. And I was actually going to have them introduce everybody so that I didn't mangle their names. And what I do like is that Alex is in the middle. So when we look at Erik, it's Erik on the right or Erik on the left.
That was intentional.
Right. Okay. So let's meet our panel. Everybody, tell everybody about yourself.
Sure. My name is Erik Rannala. I'm one of the founders of Mucker Capital. We're a seed stage venture fund based here in Santa Monica.
Hi there, my name's Alex Taussig. I'm a partner at Lightspeed Venture Partners. We're a Silicon Valley-based early-stage venture firm. We invest out of a $1.2 billion fund. We have some companies down here like Snapchat and The Honest Company and Whisper and a few others.
And Erik Manlunas, co-founder of Wavemaker Partners, and we're also a seed stage fund out of Los Angeles.
Okay, so before we get started and hear about what these guys are looking for and what they're not looking for, Erik Rannala and I had an interesting conversation before we came out here, and I said, hey, have you ever bought anything? Have you ever invested anything from one of these sessions? And if not, what's the best way to approach you? So I know everybody might be thinking about how can I approach these guys. Why don't you spell it out and let people know the best way to pitch you?
Sure. I mean, I think it's tough at conferences like this because it's such a hectic environment, and you know, after the panels, I think it's tough too when lots of people are talking. I mean, I have found that the most effective way to connect with folks at events like this is just a very quick conversation afterward, exchange. You know, if you want to get in touch, give me a card or give anyone a card, and then we have a face with the name, and then we can get in touch after that. But I think it's really tough for entrepreneurs to do like an effective pitch in an environment like this where there are so many people, so much going on, so much noise. It's really hard to kind of catch someone in the hallway or after an event and really give them a true pitch. I think it's better to try to handle that, you know, offline or separately outside the event.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, generally, you want to be able to stand out whenever you kind of approach investors and make it into sort of an organic conversation about your product, and these conferences can honestly be a little bit forced and crammed in terms of their timing. So I think it's just about making that connection, and then it's about sort of following up in the right way as well. You know, generally, I find it less appealing when folks just kind of walk around handing out business cards to everyone they meet, and it's more about who's the person I really want to form a connection with, and then make the connection, then follow up with it. It's pretty simple, actually.
Or honestly, I mean, if you want to make the connection, oftentimes it's great to get an intro, you know, from someone else. I think getting an intro, if you can, from a mutual connection is even more effective than just the business card.
Erik?
Yeah, same thing, and we're pretty active, so we've got a lot of founders, and so if you can connect with any of our founders to make that warm intro, that would be a lot helpful. These environments aren't usually that conducive for even flash pitches, and so so I think a warm intro would be the most efficient way to get the attention.
Okay, so all three of you guys, have you ever invested in a company that you met at a conference?
I don't recall, so probably not.
Alex? He's thinking.
I don't think the answer is yes, but we also invest in fewer companies than seed firms do. Each partner might invest in one or two per year. So there are many, but I can tell you the conferences have played a big role in developing the relationship with founders. Like we'll often see people many times a year on the same circuits, and it helps us form a relationship. So it's not always like that was that one business card, that one conversation led to a deal, but often it's sort of the accumulation of all these conversations and experiences together.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think we've ever invested, literally based on the pitch we got at a conference, but I do think, seeing people multiple times, meeting people, building relationships, I think that's what's great about conferences, not necessarily getting a pitch and then investing.
Okay, well, why don't you guys tell a story, pick one company that you invested in and how you found them and why you were inspired to do it. Alex, you've got a smile on your face. You thinking about Snapchat or what?
Oh, well, I joined Lightspeed about 6 months ago. So it was after we had invested in Snapchat. You have to ask Jeremy about that story, my partner Jeremy. It is a good story, though. In my past, I invested in a company called ThreadUp, which is it's really the leading marketplace for apparel. It helps you clean out your closet, sends you a bag, you put your stuff in it, and then we process it and sell it online in our store. It's just a two-sided marketplace. And when the business was getting started, I was coming out of business school with my classmate James, who came up with the idea. And initially, it was a men's shirt exchange, which he'll tell you was like a horrible idea. And I remember hearing about it and thinking, oh, that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure if I'd use that. And then checked in a few months later, and the idea had already changed. Then a few years later, and it changed again. And eventually, we ended up investing in what is now today the current business model of the company. And so, one of the things I find most interesting about my job is when you meet people, when their ideas are nascent, when you have an inkling of something big, but you don't exactly know what it's going to turn into, and then watching great people go and try to figure that out. And that experience really spoke to that.
Okay, the Eriks?
Sure. I mean, you and I chatted a little bit before this also about the types of companies.
Let's talk about Mend.
What's that?
Mend. Why don't you tell the story about Mend?
I was actually going to go slightly different. I'll talk about Mend. I'll talk about Mend as well. But we talked a little before this about what types of companies we're interested in, and what's kind of hot right now, what we're looking at. I mean, we almost have, there's almost probably an inverse correlation, like what's hot and what we're interested in at any given time. We end up really looking for things that are kind of different. And one of the companies that we invested in, one of our earliest investments was a company called Surf Air, which I think is here today or one of the sponsors. And on the surface, it sounded kind of crazy, right? It was a guy who, the CEO, didn't have any aviation experience, wanted to start a subscription-based, membership-based airline. The airline business is a horrible business, for the most part. But it was when we looked at the industry really was very broken, so it needed a different model. We love big industries that are in need, that are poorly served, right? It's one of the lowest in terms of customer satisfaction. The model's broken. Most of the big airlines don't make any money. So it's a very new and innovative model, and a great founder and a great founding team. So we really liked that about it, that it was taking a very different take on a big industry that was very broken, had really bad, it was poorly served, bad customer experience, and then really passionate, talented founders. So.
And where did you find them? How did they get to you?
We were introduced by a mutual friend. I think another founder in our portfolio maybe, and that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I think often introductions are great. It sort of makes sense that when someone you know and trust introduces you to someone and says, this guy's great, you got to meet him or her, that immediately makes you interested versus not having any context. So context, I think, makes a big difference.
Okay, Erik?
So my favorite story is we have a portfolio company here in LA that received an inbound acquisition interest from one of the private equity guys, and I was assigned by the board to take the lead in negotiating it. Long story short, the deal didn't happen, but I struck a friendship with a private equity guy that I was dealing with, and we were just comparing notes, the difference between early stage venture and private equity. And we ended up investing in a company here locally called 17 Hats that he's very good friends with, and it's become one of the fastest growing companies we have, and that's actually the biggest investment we have in our portfolio. So those serendipitous moments are few and far between, but we welcome them.
17 hats, because that's how many hats the small business person wears and has to shift during the day.
Sounds like you know the business. Yeah,
right.
That's exactly. It's a business automation platform for the micro enterprise. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about what's hot and what's not. What you're looking for, what you're not. Let's start with what you're not looking for. What's old? What's played out? What's dead? What trends are over?
We're having a very difficult time differentiating commerce place, so we're probably not looking into a lot of online commerce place. We're very fascinated with AR, VR, but don't feel that we have the core competency to differentiate it for now. And business automation platforms is always something that we're really keen on. So more enterprise and micro enterprise stuff.
Alex?
Yeah, I don't really think a lot about what I'm not interested in. Maybe it's just that I spend so much time on the things I'm interested in that stuff just falls by the wayside. We try to focus our time and prioritize it on trends that we think are really going to affect new company creation. And we try to avoid things that don't have to do with the current platform shifts, where platforms are already established. So I'll give you an example. In 2008, everyone moved into investing in mobile apps because you had third-party app stores that were really great in tools that allowed people to build great experiences. And there's been a number of companies like Uber and Snapchat that have been created because of the boom in mobile. There's been like a second app store created in the last few months, and that's the iMessage app store. And there's just the earliest signs that you can make money and build distribution through that app platform. So we're thinking a lot about how that opens up, opportunities for new use cases for messaging, integrate media into messaging, and what you can build on top of that. So we spent a lot of time trying to think through that. I think we're less concerned about what things aren't working, because honestly, we don't really know if I think that there's a good chance there will actually be a few new mobile companies that really break through, even though mobile is quote unquote saturated. It just, the bar is higher to get to the top of that app store chart. But we're seeing it. I mean, there's a few companies we're tracking right now that are actually doing quite well, despite the fact that they technically shouldn't be. So I don't like to dismiss anything out of hand, but I will tell you we spend most of our time proactively looking for shifts that we have a thesis on.
All right, Erik?
So there are certainly areas I think that are hot right now. VR is VR and AR are pretty hot. We tend to look pretty broadly and try not to look only at what's hot, or sometimes look at what's not hot, frankly. We're very focused on internet and software-enabled stuff, and anything within that we look at for the most part. There are a few things that we don't look at. Gaming, mostly areas where we don't have that much experience or don't feel like we can add a lot of value as an investor. So gaming, and the closer it gets to kind of like, content, studio type models, we probably don't look at content production as much. But anything other than that, that's internet or software enabled, both enterprise and consumer, and there are areas that we've made, where we've made a number of investments, fintech, marketplaces, SaaS, but we honestly try to keep a pretty broad net and look at anything, because a lot of the most interesting opportunities, frankly, have come from places or were companies or products or services that we never would have dreamt up ourselves. So we don't want to be too rigid about having, very, very specific theses that sort of box us into a particular area.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you ask most VCs, they would say, yeah, we stay away from content, business models because they're hit-driven, yada, yada, yada. Yet we'd all probably want to have equity in Niantic, which makes Pokemon Go, if that was available to us. So, there's always some exception that defines, the success in that category. And so I think you do need to have an open mind, and you can't dismiss things just out of hand. And when enough people start saying one thing, at some point it just becomes not true anymore.
Right, well, speaking of that app, that was the first popular app that I can remember coming out that was new in at least 12 months. Really popular. I mean, that was a whole nother story, how popular Pokemon Go was. But the App Store is the same old names. I looked yesterday. It was Facebook Messenger, Snapchat, and, YouTube.
Yeah, the App Store is a little constipated.
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard to break out because those top categories are controlled by companies with a lot of cash, a lot of network effects, a lot of distribution. But, look at Musical.ly. That
was the last one.
So that was around the same time. There are a few that pop up in random little categories, but if they can establish a network effect, they can actually persist in that top category. And it's just a lot harder because what you used to be able to do is you used to be able to pay to get to that top part, and it was actually possible, and then you'd stay there for a little while, and there would be a power law that would reinforce you at the top. Now you can't do that. You can't afford to do it because Supercell is always going to outbid you. There's always someone who's going to be able to pay more than you. So you have to do it organically.
I mean, that's one of the hardest things about mobile right now, I think, is that most people can't afford to pay, to acquire users and really drive themselves in terms of downloads and active users. It's gotten way too expensive for most companies to do that.
I've noticed recently a lot of new apps advertising on television, which free apps advertising on television. I'm trying to figure that one out. When you're watching, there are all the political stuff right now. All these new apps, home apps and things. Have you guys noticed that? Is it just me?
They're free, but a lot of them are in-app purchases, right? So, yeah, so they're getting in front of the distribution. And as to the point of these two gentlemen, those guys have huge liquid resources that they're bombarding the markets with, that most startups that won't be able to compete with.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some of the areas that are going to be hot or are hot now. Erik over here, Rannala, mentioned audio as a hot new area. Why don't you tell everybody about why you think audio and mobile is an area worth exploring, and tell them about Mend.
Sure, yeah. I mean, one area that we have been looking at and have made some investments in are mobile apps that use audio as the primary kind of user interface, if you will, or experience, for users is experiencing the app via audio. What we found, or what we've seen is that, like we talked about this earlier with the popularity of podcasts, those could be videos, but people really end up listening to podcasts audibly, and I think it's because with a mobile device, you can take it anywhere, listen anytime, you don't have to look at it, hold it, do anything, and now with wireless headsets, everything, audio is a really powerful medium that I think hasn't been exploited as much as it could, and I think is starting to. You see companies like Headspace here in LA, which has done tremendously well with audio. It's really, the whole experience is pretty much an audio experience with millions of monthly active users and subscribers. So that I think is probably, or we believe is one of the emerging sort of trends around mobile, and one of the companies we invested in this space is a company called Mend, which is a relationship app, sort of relationship coaching and content app where the primary focus right now is relationship breakups, but I think more broadly it could just be relationships in general, but with audio content around that, and then also kind of an app experience for folks that are experiencing kind of relationship problems or breakups.
So where you go after you break up. Exactly.
Mend.
Right, okay. What does the rest of the panel think about audio?
It's really interesting. I'm violently agreeing on this one. We're a few weeks away, I think, from the Apple AirPods shipping. Although I haven't seen the pre-order page yet, but I'm waiting for it. What that means is effectively you're going to have a computer in your ear. Like, someone said to me, they're like, well, what if you lose them? It's like, well, what if you don't take them out? What if you always have them on you, actually? And that's actually a more interesting question. And when you do that, you can imagine lots of audio-only apps, and or maybe audio-only plus a glance to your smartwatch. And that's going to change the UI paradigm and create all sorts of new types of interactions. The enabling technology, of course, actually being voice recognition. So because voice recognition has gotten so good, now you can actually have these. That's the why now, and why it's getting interesting now.
Okay, now before we go on to Erik, we've had headphones since the first day that the iPhone came out. So why would these headphones make any difference?
Well, it's that the wirelessness of it just allows you to kind of have them always on and always in your ears, I think, is probably going to be one of the behaviors they're trying to foster. There's also processing on board in the headphones. They're not just like dumb pieces of plastic with a speaker. So they can actually do some onboard processing. So we don't really know what that's going to encapsulate yet, because I don't think anyone's really played with them yet.
I think form factor has a lot to do with it. I mean, you think about the wired headsets, right? I mean, I still have some. It's like infuriating to try to untangle it. The phone's ringing, I'm trying to untangle it, like I'm driving, that's terrible. And then even the wireless ones now, or some of the form factors have been like a big kind of Bluetooth, thing on the side of your head. You look a little bit funny or whatever if you wear it all the time. I think now with form factors getting so much smaller, where it literally is, like an ear pod that's in your ear that isn't really even noticeable or visible most of the time, then it becomes viable, I think, to keep it in your ear without looking kind of douchey. So
I'm going to come visit both of you soon at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I want to see them still in your ear all day long, right?
You got it.
Okay. Erik, audio.
Got nothing new to add, really, to say. I agree with both of them. I mean, one thing that I would observe is traffic in this town is getting more challenging by the year, by the week. So, the trends are heading there. And if you got a smart headset that can switch over from whatever you want it to do, from phone conversations to just self-help audio content, that kind of stuff, I think that's great. I have a headset here that takes me a minute to untangle. So I'd love to have all those wires disappear.
Yeah, I have Bluetooth headphones that I reached for, and I forgot to charge them.
Yeah, but you don't want to be that guy with that Bluetooth headphone, though.
Yeah.
Well, I think eventually too. I mean, this is sort of a separate but related topic. Once wireless charging is more available, I mean, then you can literally lay them, when you lay them down on your desk or your nightstand or whatever, they'll charge. You won't have to actually go through the sort of the plug-in process of charging too. So I think we're not very far away from being able to just put your phone and your headset down at night when you go to bed, and in the morning it's fully charged, or when you put it on your desk when you're working, it's getting charged.
Yeah, before I came over here, I just got a new phone came in the mail for me to review. And I open it up. The first thing any reviewer does is they open it up and they go to charge it, right? It has a new cable. It's not the same as the old cable. Yet another one. Anyway, that's another story. One of the great things about having Alex here is that he's very prolific on Medium. So I got to read all of his posts. So now I want to talk about photography and camera apps. Now, he wrote about Snapchat Memories, which is a tool on Snapchat that he says is more useful than Google Photos. Google Photos is the free app that lets you store all your photos for free. And Alex says that Snapchat Memories, better deal for people because you're creating on Snapchat Memories. Google Photos, the main flaw was that you're not creating. Why don't you tell people about this?
I'm not sure I said it was not as useful, because I actually do use both.
I was paraphrasing.
But I think they're very different use cases. I think the interesting thing about Snapchat Memories is that it was, for me at least as a user, forget the investor hat, it was the feature that made it my default camera app. So whereas previously I would take photos to share them in my story on Snapchat, and then I would take a photo on Instagram and share it out to my followers on Instagram so they could see it, and maybe do it on Facebook. Now that it's actually storing my photos in a way that I can actually go back and see them all in one place and see all the metadata and see all my stickers and all my Bitmojis, it's actually like become my default app. And if I want to syndicate those photos out later, I don't have to manually save each one. I can just, do it after the fact because they're all there stored for me. So the post I wrote, which was basically just saying that it's the last feature that makes Snapchat a mainstream product. And they could never have started from that point because it would have been too similar to other things that existed at the time. But it's funny how now it's actually kind of coming back from this sort of fringe product into the mainstream. But Google Photos is a great product too. I just use it more for archival. So I use that to share pictures of my son with my parents. But I think Snapchat's become, because of Memories, really my dominant camera photo app.
But that's my question. On archiving, how would I find on Snapchat the pictures of my son and my parents?
Well, I think that's hard to do now. I don't have any knowledge of the future roadmap, but it would. You could imagine the same similar features that you use on Google Photos, where you auto tags people using computer vision. You could similarly do that inside of Snapchat at some point, I'm sure.
What about you guys in photos? Are you investing in any of the photo apps in that area? Is that an area of interest?
No, not lately. I love to consume them, but we haven't invested in any photo apps anytime in the last several years.
Erik? No? Yes?
No, I mean, we haven't invested in a photo app recently. We did invest previously in an app called Pick, Play, Post, which is a photo app. But we haven't made an investment recently in photo.
Okay. Before we open up to questions, which I think we should do momentarily, talk about VR. I think all three of you said you're really interested in VR. I have heard the hype for the longest period of time. I haven't really seen I haven't seen it take off in any way except for AR. With what Snapchat is doing. Tell me why I'm wrong, and convince all of us that VR is about to really happen. And what have you seen? So, start with Erik. Right?
Sure. Well, I don't know if I'm going to persuade you. We haven't made any investments in VR specifically. I think AR will probably start happening more, in the short term than VR. I think, from my perspective, I think the form factor on VR headsets are still pretty clunky. I think eventually they'll get much, much better and much more lightweight. And I think that will probably contribute to more mass market adoption. I think in the short term, VR will probably be, mostly real enthusiasts like gamers, things like that. But I think in the short term, I don't know. I don't see beyond gaming what is going to be a true sort of like mass market application of VR in the short term. But I think it's going to be really interesting, sort of medium to long term.
Alex?
So I think you can make a pretty strong bull case, and you can also make a pretty strong bear case. And just frankly, nobody knows, because this is year zero for virtual reality, as far as I'm concerned. The Sony PlayStation, I think, launched today to the public. So that's the last major headset to launch. And so after the Christmas season's over, we're going to be able to say, like, what were the shipments in 2016. But I will say, actually, that I think the bull case is you have almost every major consumer electronics company investing in this category. When you use the experiences, they're actually getting pretty good. I've had a number of experiences now where I spent an hour in VR and wanted to spend more time.
Doing what?
Actually, so I'll give you an example. There's a great app called Rec Room, where you basically can go into this play space with other people and play mini games. Like you can throw darts, you can play basketball, and it's actually with other people, and you're having conversations with them. And then they have more expansive games in there where you can go, for example, play paintball. And the paintball thing is like one of the most fun things I've done in a long time. It's so realistic. I mean, you can literally hide behind things because it can track your body in space. So I've seen a few things that make me think that people are figuring out. I think over the next few years, there's going to be more people that do that. And also, Facebook just announced they're working on a standalone headset. So that does all the tracking with no wires. So if they're able to ship that in the next couple of years at a price point that's, I say $500-600, I think that's going to be the market which it really opens up a huge new chunk of the market. Don't think of the Oculus Rift or the Vive as a thing that we need to believe everyone's going to use. That's probably not going to be it. There's probably going to be another device somewhere between the Oculus Rift and the Gear VR that is the mass market device that opens it up. That's, I think, why I'm excited about it. But I also agree, as an investor, you got to be really, really careful right now, because there is that little time gap, and truly nobody knows what the timing is going to be.
Erik?
So we're big in capital efficient spaces, and I'm just not convinced this is one of those spaces. And we're pretty small. We're a boutique operation, so it's probably not something that we could really own. We can really get in there and own a significant chunk of it. And I think it's going to be driven by the content eventually. It's all going to be, at the end of the day, it's content. The hardware and the content will have to get married, and that's where the magic will get created. So, as I said at the outset, I think it's going to happen. There's no doubt. Hopefully it happens in the next 5 to 10 years. It's just not something that we're chasing. We see at least once or twice a month we get pitched on these things. We just don't have the core competency really to really figure out and differentiate which one's going to be the winner.
Alrighty. On that note, I'm told that it's time for the next panel. I want to thank our two Eriks and Alex for coming here today. Have it a big hand.